Just a quick update on the world of boxing. Two big fights last night: Pacquiao Bradley Free and Joshua Martin in London. Pacquiao Bradley Free, I believe, was in Vegas. Um, Not a great deal to say. I just want to update this because, as a boxing fan, I'm obviously interested. I don't get pay-per-view, so I can't watch the fights directly. But a Filipino friend of mine might has given me some links to the Pacquiao bout. Both fights are significant. Firstly, with Pacquiao Bradley, it may well be Pac-Man's last fight. I know that Bob Arum is reluctant to say that. Bradley also cast doubt on that. A lot of great fighters make statements like this and go on to have one or two more fights. Manny Pacquiao's 37. He's been fighting now for about 20 years professionally. I believe his first pro debut was 1995, unless I'm mistaken. So he's a very long career, and I believe now is a perfect time for him to retire. If I was Manny Pacquiao, I would probably retire now. He's 37, so he's, in boxing terms, getting a little bit older, but by no means very old. And he would be retiring on a high. He beat Bradley, who is a very, very capable and formidable fighter. Like I said, I didn't see the fight, so I can't comment in detail. Um, but I think we can talk a bit about Manny Pacquiao's legacy because even if this isn't the exact last fight, I think most people would agree that certainly is the dawn of the end of Manny Pacquiao's career. Um, Goes without saying that Manny Pacquiao is an exceptional fighter. He's one of those guys that really does transcend the sport. And in the whole history of boxing, in the last several centuries, there's only a relatively small number of fighters who really do transcend the sport in that way. You think of people like Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Robinson, Joe Louis, Manny Pacquiao, a few others, um, possibly Mike Tyson. There's other names that it's a case of not necessarily thinking in terms of rankings, but in terms of just all time kind of appeal, all time transition from being a boxer, a great boxer, to actually going beyond the sport. Now, Pacquiao's definitely done that in a way that even other great fighters wouldn't necessarily do. He's fought and beat some of the biggest names of his era: Tim Bradley, Juan Manuel Marquez, Oscar de la Hoya. There will always be that loss to Floyd Mayweather, but it was under dubious circumstances. He had an injured shoulder. People are going to be talking about that fight for a very long time. There is still obviously the consensus that it was a big letdown for everyone because it was billed as the fight of the century. The fight itself didn't transpire to be that, but um, Manny Pacquiao can hold his head high. I think he is a great, great fighter, and just as importantly for me, he's been formidable as a sportsman, as an exemplary figure. Now, I don't sort of take the view that boxers are intended to be role models and they're meant to be kind of squeaky clean all the time. But I do think when you hold that sort of prestige, you do have some responsibility, and I think that Manny Pacquiao has taken his position with great, great exemplary conduct. He's been sportsmanlike. He never trash talks opponents. Um, he's confident. He's inspired an entire nation. What more can you ask from a fighter? So to get on to Anthony Joshua versus Charles Martin. Again, I didn't see it because I don't have pay-per-view, but incredible. Second round knockout. In fact, it might have even been first round. I need to check this up, but that's incredible. After 4 minutes, I believe. Now, it says two things. Firstly, it says three things, really. Firstly, that Anthony Joshua really is, he's not hyped. This guy really has something. It could say maybe that Charles Martin was overhyped, although I think that would be a bit unfair on Martin because, by all accounts, he was a pretty formidable force. He beat Vyacheslav Glazkov, who was a rated fighter. Charles Martin was a very capable fighter. He was gracious enough to give an interview last night, and you could tell he was disappointed, as you would expect from an undefeated fighter who's just been beaten. He handled it very gracefully, and respect to Martin for that. Um, I think the thing about Anthony Joshua is he looks a lot more like a bodybuilder than a boxer. Even in the heavyweight division, he's a big man. Um, and I think that's where the inevitable Lennox Lewis comparisons come in. Um, I actually think he looks a bit more like Linford Christie, the runner, just visually. I think he has slight more of a resemblance to Linford Christie, but Linford Christie with muscles, put it that way. He's a sort of he sometimes in the boxing world, ironically, there's this notion that guys who are really built up are kind of just muscle, but I think Joshua is showing that he really is a formidable fighter. I was watching part of a documentary on him last night, about his background in Watford, and how he rose to where he is. He has achieved big things. He's still a young guy. He's only 26, so he's still got a long way ahead. Um, I think that a domestic Joshua versus Fury fight would be massive. At this stage, I think Fury would have the edge, simply because he's had more experience and his opponents have been bigger names than Joshua's opponents. But I'm basing it solely on that. Boxing is one of the magic things about boxing is you simply don't know until two men face off in the ring. You can speculate all day. You could go on records. You can go on trends, all the rest of it. But perhaps more than any other sport, you can only really know when it happens. I think that would be a massive domestic clash. It would be huge. Um, Also keeping the boxing, and I may have previously mentioned this. Good news: Nick Blackwell has come out of a coma. His career's probably over, but like I said in previous videos, that's if it's a case of his career being over or his life being over, obviously, you know, his life is far more important. I just hope that he can deal with the situation and find some way to deal with that. It will be a big blow, and it's no fighter wants to go into a ring either ending up in that situation or, for all the hype, for all the talk, I think very, very, very few guys actually want to physically hurt their opponent. They want to win, and there's a lot of aggro and all the rest of it. But no man wants to be in a situation where their opponent ends up in hospital, unless you're a sadist or just a downright thug. And I think that when fighters get into this sport, they have to get to a sort of professional level where it's not that personal. Um, so I'm pleased that he's out of the situation, and by all accounts, it seems to be that it's less serious than first appeared insofar as bleed was on the outer part of the skull rather than on the brain. That's definitely good news, but it does remind us that this is a dangerous sport and we should never ever underestimate that. Um, to me, the Nick Blackwell situation should remind boxing fans that all of these guys deserve respect fundamentally for what they do. Unfortunately, I think it will go over a lot of people's heads, and a few months from now, we're going to be seeing the same old disrespect from casual fans. It's a pity, but that is the sport of boxing, I'm afraid. Quick note about Boxrec. A while back, I was speaking about now. The British all-time ratings are certainly interesting. I'm actually going to read this out because it read it out first 100 results. Now that sounds like a lot, but I'll try not to make it too long. Bear with me. Actually, I might make it top 50 just for the sake of space. So this is Boxrec, the Boxrec website, who they have rated as the top 50 British fighters of all time. It's certainly an interesting list. And I'll comment a bit on it afterwards. So here we go. 1. Lennox Lewis. 2. Ted Kid Lewis. 3. Jackie Patterson. 4. Randolph Turpin. 5. Freddie Welsh. 6. Benny Lynch. 7. Nazim Hamed. 8. Peter Kane. 9. Al Phillips. 10. John Conte. 11. Ernie Roderick. 12. Len Harvey. 13. Owen Moran. 14. Jock McAvoy. 15. Jackie Brown. 16. Tom Smith. 17. Freddie Mills. 18. Neil Tarleton. 19, Dave Crowley, 20, Joe Calzaghe, 21, Jimmy Wild, 22, Jack Kidd Berg, 23, Dave Charnley, 24, Terry Downs, 25, John H. Stracey, 26, Jim Brady, 27, Henry Cooper, 28, Rinty Monaghan, 29, Lloyd Honegan, 30, Brian Curvis, 31, Bermondsey Billy Wells, 32, Eric Boone, 33, Terry Allen, 34, Dick Corbett, 35, Bob Fitzsimmons, 36, Ken Buchanan. And to continue, 37, Bruce Woodcock, 38, Dennis Andres, 39, Johnny King, 40, Young Ahern, 41, Peter Keenan, 42, Hard Winston, 43, Carl Frock, 44, Ronnie Jones, 45, Jim Driscoll, 46, Seaman Tommy Watson, 47, Tommy Farr, 48, Jimmy Warnock, 49, Jimmy Walsh, 50, Tommy Davies. I'll round it up there. That's certainly an intriguing list. There's a lot of big names that are a lot lower than you would expect. For example, Ricky Hatton only makes it to 57th. Now, I could hear an argument for him not necessarily being in top 10, but 57th sounds a bit harsh. Joe Calzaghe, 20. Jimmy Wild, 21. Many other sources would easily have put Wild at number one. There's other big names there that are relatively low down. Jack Kidd Berg at 22. And then there's also names that are today, even among boxing historians, wouldn't exactly be household names. Um, Brian Curvis at 30, I've never heard of the guy. Dick Corbett, 34. Ken Buchanan only made it to 36. Some of the results are also dubious. I mean, Bob Fitzsimmons technically was British. He was born in Cornwall, but he had all his fights in the States. Younger Hearn, again, born in Preston, but he had all his fights in Brooklyn. We're talking almost 100 years ago here. Um, there's guys in this top list that I've never heard of. Number 61, Billy Spider Kelly, was a Belfast fighter in the 40s and 50s. Um, a lot of interesting results there. So what I'm going to do after this video is do some more research on some of these lesser known guys and find out why they have been deemed to be in the position they are by Boxrec. I'm not questioning the results. I'm just surprised by it. Lennox Lewis at number one, I've no big issue with. I'd always put Lewis in the top five. I'd have no problem with that. Joe Bugner doesn't even get a mention, which I think is a bit ridiculous. I mean, I put Bugner above Henry Cooper, and okay, he did lose a lot of his big fights, but he still was one of the top contenders of the 70s. So I think they've been a bit hard on Joe Bugner there. Let me know what you think of that top 50. And, I did write down the top 100, but that's top 50. Anyway, I'm going to round it up here. That's some of my thoughts from the world of boxing. Sure, I'll make another video later on if anything else comes to mind. Thank you for watching.